Hello everyone, Isaac here for the Gaming Grid. I started playing Guild Wars 2 a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks now, and I wanted to talk about some of the concerns some players have been having, or at least those I've heard of, and share my perspective on them. The issue in particular that I wanted to talk about is the leveling curve and the problems some players have been experiencing with it, especially the underleveling feeling that they find where they find themselves a couple levels below the required level for the next zone or the next renowned heart or something like this. And I feel this is happening to them because most of those players are approaching the game with a completionist or checklist mindset. The mindset that players have been conditioned into by playing MMOs that are currently on the market, such as World of Warcraft, Rift, and the Old Republic, just to name a few, where the quest design in those games is very linear. You go to point A, you do objective Y, and then you move on to point B and do objective Z, and then you obtain a reward for it, which is actually somewhat the case in Guild Wars, where that's the structure of the Renown Hearts, where it's a very linear system. You do something and then you get a reward, but it's not the primary goal of the PvE content, and I'll get to that point in a little bit. But I want to talk about the mindset first. With the mindset that they're approaching the zones, they go talk to the scouts, which are presenting them with the Renown Hearts. It's circling the Renown Hearts on the map, showing them, oh, this is what you got to do. And so that's actually a bit misleading, because it makes it look like the goal of the zone, in terms of completion, is those Renown Hearts. And the Renown Hearts are actually not like quests in the traditional means, where they help you like complete the map or complete the story while they're there as a world completion thing to do. It's kind of like a collectible, but rather they're not there for as the content. They're there to show players where to go in a certain zone, pointing them near a zone that is that there's going to be a dynamic event happening, and that's what the real content is the dynamic events. That's what's going to level you faster and all of those things. So the actual content for PvE is the dynamic events. The Renown Hearts are there to train you to go seek out new areas that you've never seen before and seek out those new dynamic events. And this is prevalent in later zones as the Renown Hearts become far and fewer between. Eventually there's no Renown Hearts in the highest level zones, and by then hopefully you would have been trained by the game to go seek out the new areas and find the new dynamic events. And the dynamic events will also grant you far more experience than any Renown Heart, maybe 2 to 3 times more, sometimes 5 times more. Depends on the event, really. And as well as Karma, which is a special currency where you can buy items and things like that. And the dynamic event is where you'll find kind of a lot of the lore for the game, where rather the Renown Hearts are little tasks for villagers or things like that, and they'll send you a letter at the end saying, like, thanks. It's pretty much it. And when you're doing a dynamic event as well, I would suggest sticking around for a bit after it's finished. You never know what could happen. More often than not, the NPCs you helped will go on and continue doing something, and it'll start off another event. And that gives you like big chain of events, which gives you a lot of XP, a lot of currency and things like that. And so, for example, here, this lady wants some firefly luminescence to decorate the town. So after you've brought enough to her, she will walk up to lanterns and light them, and then it will start off another dynamic event, where the bright lanterns will attract mosquitoes that are harassing the villagers, and you have to clear them out. So there you go, that's 2 events in a row, and that gives you a lot of XP just for those 2. So the example I gave with the mosquitoes, it's not terribly exciting, but that's kind of what you can expect from the starter experiences of dynamic events, starting you off fairly slow and simple to get new players accustomed to the mechanics. But it does get more exciting as you level on and keep going. For example, I found this Hylic village who they needed help, so you help the Hylics, and then you have to do all these other like little boss fights that you have to prove that you are a champion of the sun, and then eventually it leads up to a very crazy big boss fight with a Hylic who transforms you into little creatures, and you fight her, and then eventually once you defeat that boss, there's a big chest that appears. So um, sometimes, yeah, when you do events, there will be bosses at the end, and those guys are pretty cool. They give you lots of XP and loot and stuff like that. Another example is I was in the swamp, and there's some Sylvari who are walking around the swamp. They want to clear the corruption, so you go and help them clear the corruption, and eventually it shows you that you have to kill the Blight Lieutenants of corruption. So you kill the Blight Lieutenants, and you think, okay, cool, you've cleared the forest, and all of a sudden the ground starts shaking, and I was kind of surprised. I didn't expect this to happen. All of a sudden, this just giant worm comes out of the ground, and that was a really exciting boss fight. And at the end, it gives you a big loot-filled chest with a bunch of items, as you'll see here in the video.
Must be weakening. Don't let it.
My adrenaline is rising. For great justice! I'm very satisfied.
So by participating in these large chain events, you will get a lot of rewards, a lot of XP, and it's going to be quite substantial to helping you in reaching higher levels so that you can move on. Now, something I did find a little strange about the dynamic events is I felt that at this point in the game, around level like 15 to 25, in between this, level 1 to 25 or something like that, I haven't been higher than that in other zones. I feel like the events reset far too quickly, where I've seen the same event 2 or 3 times after only playing for like 40 minutes, and so it feels kind of weird because it feels like your impact on the world isn't very relevant because things just reset. It's like, oh, you didn't do it, so you do it again, and it's a little strange. And I find that the repetition of event is kind of bothersome, since when you're exploring, you want to find new and exciting things, which is what we're offered actually in the linear questing system. Is it's showing us new things because we're being led along a path. It tells us a story, it brings us to new places without much worry. And this is actually kind of what the personal story does in Guild Wars, except the storytelling's a bit all over the place. It jumps, and it's not very structured, but that's another topic entirely. So in terms of linear questing, since the dynamic events reset so often, you do it once and oh, it's exciting, it's cool, it's new stuff, and then it resets, and you've already seen it. The initial excitement is not as prevalent, and it becomes a bit drab. And after having done the same event multiple times, seeing it pop up for the 5th time, I've actually caught myself saying like, "Oh, this again? I don't want to do this." Which, of course, you don't have to, right? It's just there as content. So yeah, somewhat the same feeling I get from running dailies in World of Warcraft, where you don't want to. It's kind of boring to do the same thing over and over again, but people do it because they want the reward at the end. And that's kind of like why I started doing the events over and over again, because I knew they gave me a lot of XP and karma and things like that, things I can use. And leveling up, I actually level up way faster because I kept doing the events over and over again. And I was maybe over leveled by like 10 levels. But actually, also, like I mentioned, the dailies in World of Warcraft where it's repetitive, they've actually randomized it and mixed it up a bit every day, so you get some new things. So the repetition's not as hard. And we'll see what happens in Mr. Pandaria. But we're talking about Guild Wars, so let's not talk about World of Warcraft for now. So yeah, we're talking about the dynamic events, and I have another point to make about when it resets, why it's kind of bothering me. I said, I mentioned the impact on the world is not as prevalent when it resets. And so yeah, you feel like you've had this progress, and oh cool, you unlocked this part of the world. Like there's this one event in Caledon Forest where you help a Hylic collect crate skins to prove that you're friendly to another High Lake village, and once you complete that, the High Lake village unlocks, and the High Lake are friendly to you, and you get unlocked some vendors and things like that. And that's kind of what the end game is in Ara, the level 80 zone. Um, Everything's contested all the time, so you have to like fight it off and unlock these temples so you can unlock vendors. But it's very, very temporary. It switches back really fast, so it's kind of weird because you get that sense of progression when you do it, but then it's taken away within like 10 minutes, and you have to do it again, and that's not very fun. Yeah, dynamic events are very good for leveling, and they're quite interesting and fun, but there's still a lot of complaints about it, where, yeah, it's reset too often, and things like that. But there are also many other things you can do to help your leveling process. Gathering and crafting, for example, that gives you quite a lot of XP. I try to get everything I see on the map that's close to me, and when I feel I need an upgrade, I go and play around in the crafting and make myself some new gear. It really does help you boost your level if you're stuck. Is crafting. When I've done a lot of crafting so far, and I had only done 2 zones in total, completed 2 zones at 100%, and I was level 28, which is way, way higher than you should be around 25 once you complete 2 zones. So, yeah. Alright, so that should be most of it. Let's recap, shall we? So the dynamic events are there to get you the most experience and kind of progress you through the world. The renown hearts are there not as quests, but there to guide you towards areas where events may pop up. Instead of playing it like a linear MMO experience, I would rather change your mindset towards being more an explorer and wondering what's around the next corner and things like that. If you will, kind of how people play Elder Scroll games, or how I play the Elder Scrolls games, where you have an open world to wander around and find cool things, go explore, and have a curious mind and wandering mind. It's interesting. Uh, so yeah, go find out what the population of Tyria is up to, and get involved in the lore and things like that. Even though it's a little strange how they've presented some of the lore and story. The lore in Guild Wars is actually really interesting, but the way they tell it in the game could use some work. Although, now that I think about it, I play the Elder Scrolls game like a wanderer, and I wander around finding interesting things. But I know people who played very differently. Some roam around naked and wielding a wooden plank, going around massacring towns in the Elder Scrolls games. So, I wouldn't suggest playing like that. It's a little concerning. Oh, and if you find yourself really stuck in experience, that is in Guild Wars 2, go craft a bit. It's quite really good for XP. Alright, that's going to do it for me today. I've rambled on far too long at this point, so thank you for watching and listening, and do take care. Bye-bye.